Alrighty, everybody. Here we are for another round of Astro-Babble. Let's go ahead and get started. We've got 8 more charts that everybody has thrown into the queue. Thank you, everybody who continues to like, but also share this video with friends and family who are also interested in astrology. I've been getting tons of chart requests, not just from you, but also for spouses, for children, for friends, family, all of that. Yes, we can add those charts to the queue. Please make sure that you have consent of everyone that you send their birth information to, and we will put them in the queue as well. Yes, so we're about to get started with another round of 8 charts. If you would like to submit your information, I need your birth date, your birthplace, and your exact birth time. Those are very, very important, as well as spelling out the month and day, especially for those of you overseas, so that we can get the most accurate birth information possible so that we can do these live streams, again, accurately. That's one of the things that I pride myself in when I work with clients individually, as well as making sure that all of the charts and times are accurate. So if you don't know your time, we might need to schedule a private consult to do some rectification of the birth chart and things like that, which we can do. Feel free to check out my website for private consults, scorpiorisingastrology.com, and or shoot me an email, Sam at Scorpio Rising Astrology, and we'll get to it. But let's go ahead, pop open a can of something bubbly, and pull up our first charts. Okay, let's look at Billy Joe. Billy Joe was born 6:35 a.m. in Nolens. Let's go ahead and take a look at her chart. Woo! Oh my gosh. Woo! First chart out of the gate, Billy Joe, and you got to hit me with a massive Scorpio stellium in the first house. You had to go there, didn't you? Didn't you? That's ridiculous. So we have Mercury, we have the Sun, we have Jupiter, we have Venus, and we have the Ascendant, with Venus conjoining the Ascendant and Jupiter conjoining the Ascendant. Jesus, all at 20 degrees of Scorpio. Mercury's at 13, Sun is at 18. So let's talk about Scorpio for 2 seconds. And I know that some of you have asked me, like, why do I focus so much on Scorpio? And I really focus on what's present in the chart. But part of my business, part of my handle, is Scorpio rising astrology, because I have Scorpio rising. The rising sign, or the sign that's on the ascendant, and the sign that dictates the first house of self, is even more important than your sun sign or your moon sign. And in cases like Billy Joe, where we have both the ascendant and the sun here, as well as 3 other personal planets, there's a massive, absolutely massive dose of Scorpio energy in the chart that we can't deny. We have to talk about it. So it may seem like I'm harping on particular signs, but each chart is very individual. It just so happens that I'm Scorpio rising, and I tend to attract those types of people because there's a level of depth that Scorpio rising has that I think other signs don't necessarily understand. Scorpio is also one of the signs that gets the most flack in the zodiacal system for being dark, being broody, being gothic, being scary. And indeed, the underworld is a very scary place. But there are some of us in this lifetime who have chose to navigate that path, who have chose to walk the path of shadow. And we understand that shadow is not necessarily evil. Evil is intention. It's not the energy of darkness. Darkness is healing. Darkness is seclusive or reclusive. Darkness is still. Darkness is silent. Darkness is a beautiful place for those of us who need to rest and recover. It's very difficult to rest in a very loud space when the sun's beating down on you and you have all this activity in the chart. So when we see somebody like Billy Joe, who has this Scorpio stellium in the first, all of those Scorpio qualities are just doubled, tripled, and in her case, times 5 in her chart, where her planet Mercury, the planet that rules the mind, is in Scorpio. The Sun, the planet that rules the ego, first house of Scorpio. Jupiter, that abundant planet that makes things big, including being in the first house, making her personality very big, super Scorpio energy. So she's not just a baby scorpion, she's a big old scorpion. And then we also have Jupiter conjunct Venus, doubling down on Venus. Both benefics in the first house really bring a sweet and prosperous and lucky edge to Billy Joe's chart that I think she's been able to take really good advantage of throughout the life so far. And then all of that conjunct the ascendant. The ascendant is that helm of the chart. It's the personal place marker that we see when we want to look at what factors dictate a person's chart. We also look for the Lord of the chart in an astrology consult, and the planet that rules Scorpio, not secondarily in terms of Pluto. That's a little bit more modern. We're looking at traditional rulership. So we're looking at Mars specifically. Her Mars is in Capricorn, the sign of its exaltation, in the third house. We also have the South Node here in Capricorn, which is a little bit tricky. Whenever I see Mars and the South Node together in a house, it's this quicksand phenomenon. It's somebody who's trying to run, 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 but the energy of that space is sucking them deep, 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 deep. And this is all happening in her third house of communication. So her communication style, although Capricorn does give a certain level of eloquent dictation, she might find that she needs to speak super fast in order to get her point out, and she's almost chasing the words out of her mouth when she speaks. But that third house is also teaching and writing. The Lord of the chart being present here in Mars's case really does give her an edge in the teaching and writing space. That's something that she's notoriously good at, especially because Mars is also ruling her sixth house of work. And that sixth house of work is kind of part of that writing teaching space. So she'd be a great teacher, she'd be a great author, she'd be a great person to pass on the information that she's learned with all of her Scorpio detective skills to that next generation. Let's see what else. We do have issues with self-image. And one of the reasons why we come to that conclusion, and this is different from self-sabotage. This is different from low self-esteem. This is a body dysmorphia placement, which is not necessarily connected to one's self-value. It's connected to one's self-image, like their physical nature, although it is psychological. Because Venus is in Scorpio, the sign of its fall, it does not like to be in Scorpio because it's opposing Venus's natural ruler, Taurus. Venus on the ascendant normally would give beauty markers, which is great, except Venus is exiled per se, and is ruling the 12th house of hidden enemies, along with Jupiter and Saturn. Beauty is something that Billie Joe will grow into. It's probably something that she felt very, very self-conscious of during the first 30 years, but 50 years really, because of Pluto, of her life. Venus conjunct the ascendant, even though Venus is in fall, Jupiter is here as well. People naturally see beauty in Billie Joe. It's a factor that she can't shake. But whether or not she sees that beauty in herself is a different story. Again, that first house of self is tricky when we see planets who are not in their proper sign, or who are in detriment or fall. And that speaks really towards the nature of the person being self-unaware to a certain degree, and especially with Venus, the planet of love and beauty and appreciation, ruling that house of hidden enemies, and Venus being the least properly placed in that ascendant lineup and conjoining the ascendant by degree at 20 degrees. We can really see that self-love and self-beauty are factors that we really need to work on with Billie Joe for sure. We do have a moon in Virgo up in the 11th, which is a great friendship placement, honestly. I really enjoy it. The moon is at 29 degrees, 54 clicks in, so we need to be super specific about that birth time. Because just a couple minutes, like 10 minutes-ish, and that moon would go into Libra in the 12th house, and then we would really have some self-consciousness happening. But the moon is still 29 in Virgo in the 11th. So friends are easy to come by emotionally, also very supportive friendship dynamics, people who are able to kind of gut check her when she's getting a little bit too out of hand. Really, really great stuff. The sun being in the first and then ruling the 10th, we find that there's an element of fame that Billie Joe will have in the life. She'll be very well known for what she does. Unfortunately, Scorpios don't really like to be well known for what they do. There is a natural square between those two signs. But it is something that Billie Joe will have to contend with. The idea that her personality is so compelling to a lot of people that she naturally gets thrown in the spotlight. Part of her self-mastery, though, is actually making friends with people overseas, higher intellectuals, and foreigners, and potentially travelers. The Moon in Virgo in the 11th, ruling her North Node in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education, as well as spirituality. Definitely something to be aware of, where that South Node is in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, and the Lord of the house is there, really telling us that yes, teaching is important. Yes, communication is important. Yes, being that person who disseminates information is important, but you're really working towards the higher octave of that experience, Billy Joe. I think your friends will constantly tell you as well, reach higher, go further. You're more than this. You're better than this. And I think that that's true. You're not just meant to be a teacher. You're meant to be a teacher of very important topics, specifically humanitarian efforts and social groups. So if we're able to take what you think you're good at and then level it up and really shoot for the it's one of those things like shoot for the moon and you'll catch a few stars. That's what we're looking at in Billy Joe's chart. That North Node in the 9th, ruled by the moon in the 11th, getting those supportive friends to remind you that, hey, it's okay to aim high. And in fact, by aiming high, you're fulfilling your life's purpose this go around. Cool. Yeah, so let's go ahead and continue to talk. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Helen. Hey, Fatima. Hey, Raven. Hey, Marie. Hey, Valerie. Thank you all for tuning in. Everybody on Instagram as well. At Scorpio Rising Astrology is my Instagram too. Let's go ahead and continue to run through our charts. We've got 8. We have 8 every morning. If you'd like to submit yours, just give me your birth date, place, and exact time, and we'll throw you into the queue. Literally, like yeet you into the queue. Okay, we got Amy Louise. Let's take a look at her chart. 9:34 a.m. in Baltimore. Ooh, another stellium. Fabulous. We have another stellium this time, except it is a Virgo stellium in the 12th house. Goodness, 1st house, 12th house themes this morning. 1st house, 12th house themes. We ladies and gentlemen, and all those in between, we gotta talk about this. So we have a Libra ascendant with a South Node right on top of that Libra ascendant. Libra ascendant is interesting. Libra placements I really enjoy because when somebody has Libra in their chart, there's this natural sense of beauty to their experience. It's not like a Taurus, which is also ruled by Venus, which is more homey, more practical, safe. Would be a good way to think about Taurus. Libra is that external beauty that radiates. It's that natural glow to the skin. It's that being completely photogenic when nobody's looking. It's that natural artistry to the frame, the symmetry of the face. There's a lot of things that we see with the Libra ascendant that naturally indicate beauty placements. However, again, we have a Venus in the sign of its detriment this time. So Venus is in Virgo, another sign that it does not like to be in. Venus is also the ruler of the chart, and Venus is in the 12th house of hidden enemies. So we have basically the worst place that a Venus could be in, and in the worst house, ruling Amy's chart. So we have a lot of self-sabotage here. We have a lot of, I'm not good enough. We have a lot of, it's okay for everybody else to get a fair life, but I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. That needs to stop, especially because we have the sun in Virgo in the 12th here. Hidden enemies, including the self, are abundant in this lifetime. The new Demi Lovato song, I think, is very appropriate for you, Amy. How does it go? I can't think of it, but something to the effect of, I'm a pro when I'm beating up on myself, but I'm an expert at giving love to somebody else, something like that. It's just that song, when will I love you be enough? Something to that degree. Like that's your power anthem, honey. Go look that up on YouTube, because that's totally your jam and something you should live your life by. I think that that's totally appropriate, especially because, Demi is so beautiful and she's so amazing and she's so artistic. And yet she talks in the song about all of her flaws and all of the self-sabotage that she creates, and how really, it really is about self-love, that permission from yourself to be yourself, that creates the most value in life, period. So many Virgo placements, a lot of the insanity that kind of runs your chart is actually too much sanity. And I think that that's something that a lot of people won't understand, but it's something that you'll understand specifically. Virgo is hyper analytical to a fault. So we're almost tripping into a point of uber rationality. So it's not like you're crazy. You're just too not crazy is a good way to think about it. The mind is too latched onto things, too latched on to putting things in boxes. You probably have 3 label makers around the house, and I'm not judging, but I'm also telling you that that's not necessarily how you achieve happiness in life. So we just need to be a little bit more careful about how you judge not yourself, but also your space, the people around you, and put those skills to work. Virgo stelliums are really good at controlling chaos, especially with all this 12th house activity. You would do excellent in a hospital. You would do excellent in a work environment that really allows you to extend your reach into many different pots, many different places, and bring forward a certain sense of order, a certain sense of okayness, a certain sense of being who you are, which is that super over analytical, judging everything every 2 seconds. We have a disaster plan. We have a backup disaster plan. In fact, we have 12 backup disaster plans, and all of them are color coded with tabulations. Like, that's who you are. Unfortunately, that large piece of you does not operate well in a calm, collected, and serene environment. It just doesn't. So we need to put you where you're valuable. And I think that that's part of the reason why I think astrology is so important, is all of your tendencies are not wrong. We just need to put you in your element. Yeah. We don't ask fish to climb trees. We don't ask elephants to swim long distances or hold their breath underwater. We just don't, because they're not equipped to do those things. You're equipped to use all of your hyper analytical skills in situations of extreme chaos. Extreme chaos, the level of chaos that most people would not feel comfortable in. Because what happens in those situations is you immediately take all of that pressure off of you, and you put it into your environment, and you're able to bring peace and serenity where peace and serenity did not exist. However, when that level of disruption is not surrounding you, all of that self-criticalness turns inward, and you start to attack yourself. It's kind of like an autoimmune disease, except with your personal chart placements. We need to give you something to chew on. We need to give your brain something to work on. And unfortunately, the only way that you thrive is in that state of complex disorder, where you can actually use all of your hidden talents to the fullest of their abilities. Yeah, so that's fun. We also have a Mars and Leo in the 11th. You've got some really dramatic friends, honey. Like, really dramatic friends, like super dramatic, over the top friends. That's ridiculous. Mars and Leo is just a super fire sign. It's that warrior energy that's clouded in a lion's skin. Like, it's ready to go to battle at any minute, but also like break down on the dance floor. Like, it's such a fun energy in your 11th house of friendships. I really enjoy that very much. Your moon is in your 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, being ruled by that Jupiter. So it wouldn't surprise me if you, again, took all these experiences of you trying to master yourself and started to write about it, started to teach about it, worked in the, like the psychology of nursing would be a good way to exercise that moon placement, that teaching placement, or working at a teaching hospital would also be an excellent outlet for that space in your chart. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we have issues with money, but friends kind of cover the money thing. We have Saturn in the 7th house of relationships retrograde. That's a little bit tough for relationships, but we also have Aries ruling that friendship house. So there's a steady supply of potential partners. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We just keep going back to that Virgo stellium in the 12th house of hidden enemies, hospitalizations, that rules so heavily over your personality in your chart. Crack that code and you're golden. Perfect. Hello, everybody. Thank you for jumping on. I appreciate you. Yes, if you would like to get in the queue, just submit your birth date, place, time, and we will get you in the queue for that. We've got, I'm going a little bit slow this morning, taking a little bit too much time with these charts. Let's go ahead and move to number 3. Natasha was born at 1:33 p.m. in Miami. Oh, Scorpio ascendant. And we have a mini stellium, technically a stellium with the ascendant, in Scorpio as well. This time we have Jupiter in Scorpio, the moon in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, and the ascendant in Scorpio. So we have the ruler of the chart in the first house of self. That's a very powerful personality, and a powerful personality doubly because Jupiter's here, the moon is here in the first. So an over-identification with the emotions. And this is something that we need to be aware of in Natasha's chart, hun. You are not necessarily what you feel. It is something that you identify heavily with. Your emotions tend to swallow you whole, and that's like some people might say that's a part of your life, especially because anger is involved with that Scorpio. That Scorpio Mars conjoining the moon at 12 degrees. There's a lot of intensity to your feelings, and it might seem like you are your feelings, and that's an easy way for you to say that. However, I'm here to tell you that you are not your feelings. Your feelings are a part of you, but you are not solely them. You can use your other skills, like your Mercury and Virgo up in the 11th house. Honey, you are smart as hell. You are so smart. Don't let your head be victimized by your heart. Like there's so much that's happening in between your ears. It's ridiculous. Don't think that this overwhelming sense of emotion is the only way for you to function, especially because that personality trait is directly squaring your Venus and Leo up in the 10th of career. Like if you let your feelings get the best of you, then there will be a serious career implication. You have markers for fame in your chart, especially because the sun is in that 11th house of social groups, and it is ruling your Venus and Leo in the 10th. It wouldn't surprise me if you've already had multiple brushes with fame thus far in life and lots of career success. But when we look at how hard you work and how much you push yourself, that's just a Scorpio thing as well, with Mars ruling the chart. We can also really see that because of that square is happening between your moon, Mars, and your Venus up in the 10th, that Venus and Leo is who you should be in the public eye. But if you're so overcome and burning up on the inside with all of these really intense feelings, like so intense feelings, like nobody gets it, honey. Like these feelings are lava inside of you. It's so ridiculous. That level of intensity is just going to screw you up if you let it ruin your life. So we need to find accurate ways to process those feelings. We need to find ways to discharge those feelings, especially in the form of physical activity. When we have Mars ruling the chart, especially when Mars is in the first house, there is a need for movement. There is a need for exercise. There is a need for physical engagement. If you're not moving the body, the Mars in your chart is not activating properly. And so we really need to make sure that the emotional energy is coming out through the tissues. It's really allowing itself to be expressed. You're pushing out all those emotions through some sort of physical activity, as opposed to if you were just kind of sitting at a desk all day, doing your own thing, blah, blah, blah. That's like putting the volcano over all that lava and just letting the pressure build and build and build until finally one day on some unsuspecting victim, you just goddamn explode. And that's not all right. That's not a healthy way for us to live life, right? And it's naturally going to conflict with this beautiful, absolutely beautiful Venus and Leo in the 10th, ruled by the sun in the 11th. Like you're such a people person. You have so much charisma. I'd hate to see that ruined by this overactive Mars conjoin the moon in the first. There's so many ways we can discharge that tension. And I think part of that is by using the smarts that you were given at birth. Like, again, you are so intellectually gifted. It's so prominent in your chart, especially when you tap into the hive mind of greater communities. Like, you're such a researcher. You'll go in and find any solution to any problem that exists. Use that for yourself. Don't think you have to do this alone. I know that Mars in Scorpio in the first house of self tells you all the time that this is about you and you alone, and nobody can get you, and you're the only one. I get it. Scorpio in the first house too, Pluto on top of the ascendant. I know I'm super broody and self-sufficient as well, but you have a layer of toxicity that builds up, and it tends to be very caustic to your soul when you don't allow yourself to break free from that emotional pressure. And it's, like I said, it's just going to continue to screw up your career if you let it. And that's really the big message that I have for you. Like, your chart is so well focused, but We just need to be aware that there's so much of you that needs to be remediated in that first house of self so that you can really achieve the unfolding of the beauty in your 10th and 11th house of success and friendships and group tribal communications. Good stuff. Good morning, Tiffany. Good morning, Albert. Good morning, Julian. Good morning, everybody on Instagram. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. We are doing 8 charts this morning. If you would like your chart featured, send me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. Spell out your month and day for me so I know which one's which, especially for those of you overseas. If you would like to book a private consult, just visit scorpiorisingastrology.com and we will get you on my books. Let's move on to chart number 4. We're looking at Stephanie. Stephanie was born 9:45 a.m. in Evansville. Fucking A. All these stelliums, absolutely ridiculous. Y'all are trying me this morning. So we have the ascendant at 1 degree of Capricorn. We also have, drum roll please, we have Uranus in Capricorn, Neptune in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, and the North Node in Capricorn, all in the first house of self. That's lovely. So when we look at, again, the Lord of the Ascendant being in the first house, we have a double dose of that planetary energy. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, in yesterday's live stream with Saturn ruling the Ascendant. So the Ascendant is the peak place of self. And when we find the Ascendant ruler, the planet that rules sign on the Ascendant, in the first house, we have a double dose of that planetary energy. Saturn's qualities are the following: restrictive, mean, dense, cold, passive-aggressive, holier than thou, also very intellectually smart, very observant, always striving, plays the long game. It's the tortoise as opposed to the hare. And Saturn is just really, really good at saying no, both to oneself and others. When we look at the first house is not just the self, it's also the house from a medical astrology standpoint that rules the body. So when we find so much happening in that first house of the body, as well as the first house of self, there's a lot we can tell about the constitution of the person that we're working with. Saturn makes things dry. Saturn makes things cold. Saturn makes things withered. So Stephanie's body for the first 30 years of life was probably very awkward, was very much in a state of lack. There might be issues with, I see this a lot with Saturn ruler in the first and the Ascendant. There might be issues with starvation, like anorexia or bulimia, dietary issues that force you to give up or restrict or control what is being put into the body. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, Stephanie. I personally have struggled with eating disorders throughout my life. I see multiple clients with eating disorders. It's nothing that can't be worked with, but it is a very Saturnian thing to say, I am not worthy of nutrients, and it is the only thing that I can control in my uncontrollable life. Therefore, I'm not going to eat. It's kind of like the child saying, I'm going to hold my breath until you give me what you want, except you are both the child and the parent in that case, and food is the breath, right? It's a tool. It's a tool to control. No shame in that. However, we also have multiple things in regards to the body systems that Capricorn rules in your first house. So we have the bones, the teeth, and the joints, all in that first house of Capricorn, getting a physical kind of thermometer reading on those body systems is going to be very important for you, because that's your major body system to pay attention to in your physical makeup. If the bones and joints and teeth start to act up, then you know that there's a deeper dysfunction in the body, because that is the Lord of your chart. That is the major body system that the stars have dictated as your kind of foundation. Cool. So yeah, we also have the North Node here in the first, which means that really, Stephanie, this time around, your primary goal is just to work on you. Yeah, success is fun. Success is important. You have multiple markers for success in the chart. But when we look at your function as a person, we need to understand that you working on you getting your personality sorted out is really the primary focus of your life this go around. Not necessarily relationships. That's just how it works. Let's see. We have Mars in the sixth, ruling a moon in Aries in the fourth. So working from home, definite possibility. Especially if you work in the medical field, working from home in the medical field, a possibility. Um, Virgo and Capricorn placements, strong stelliums in those signs are really good analysts. They're really good again at looking over large sums of data and saying, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that, cut that back, cut that back. Don't do that. We need to organize this data and make sure that everybody gets what they need as opposed to what they want. And using that kind of deprecation in a business setting is a very strategic way to do that. And really, again, back to that Virgo stellium that we talked about earlier, Capricorn and Virgo are just very good at going into those situations and telling people who don't like to hear no, no. And that's really, really good. Let's see. We do have the sun in Sagittarius in the 12th house. So again, we have self-confidence issues, self-sabotage, which is a little bit of a dangerous placement to see with that Saturn in the first. We need to make sure, again, that you surround yourself with supportive people, places, things. Stephanie, there's a lot to your chart that begs for support. So a support system is going to be one of the most helpful things that you can develop throughout your entire life. We also have Pluto in Scorpio, which is that generational planet. Everybody in your generation has Pluto in Scorpio, but you've placed it in the 11th house of friendships. So learning to make friends, specifically in that kind of Scorpio realm. So having friends that are penetrative, deep, they're able to see into you when you cannot see into yourself. Those are the kind of people that you should surround yourself with, because those are the people that are going to help you lockpick your life. Which you kind of need, because you need somebody who's not going to fall for that Capricorn defense system, all of those walls that you put up. Scorpio just tends to walk through the walls and just be like, hey, I'm here. I'm literally in your throne room. I could take over your space, but I'm not going to, because I don't work like that. I just want you to know that you're worthy. That's the kind of friend that you should surround yourself with. We do have a lot of death in the chart. That's interesting. That sun in Sagittarius ruling Jupiter and Leo in the 8th. Jupiter and Leo is about to station as well, surrounded by death. Lots of death in the chart from that perspective. Yeah, I think that's maybe one of the reasons why the hardening of that Capricorn ascendant and Saturn in the first happened so early for you, Stephanie, is because maybe the loss of people really spiraled you into this idea of everything is temporary. So why should I not defend myself against massive amounts of change? It's a valid strategy, but we just need to be aware that your brushes with death are not necessarily common, and they do need to be processed instead of hidden. We can't just take all of those experiences and dump them into the subconscious and then forget about them, right? Cool. Okay. Lot of stuff to cover in Stephanie's chart. I'm getting lost in these charts today. Thank you so much for everybody jumping in your stuff. Cracking the code, spot on. Excellent. Thank you, Natasha, Sandy, Julie, Amy, everybody jumping on. Let's continue to roll down because we're halfway and halfway. Need to stay focused. Let's go to Tiffany. Okay, Tiff, let's see what's going on. So Tiffany was born 7:30 p.m. in Bulawayo. Hopefully I'm saying that right. We have no stelliums in this chart. So we have a ascendant in Gemini, which makes Mercury the ruler of the chart. Mercury is in that 8th house of death, taxes, accounting, estates, business. So we have entrepreneurship tendencies, but also anytime that I see Mercury in the 8th house, there are mediumship qualities that are present in the chart. Just the ability to speak with the dead, to speak the language of business, to speak those different languages that other people need in order to traverse bridges that would connect other people, whether that's the metaphoric act of business, like connecting, being a networker, being a connector, and or that bridging the line between the living and those who have passed. So that's that. Mercury is also ruling the 4th house of family. So wouldn't surprise me again because the ruler of the chart is ruling that house of family, and Pluto is also in Virgo in the fourth. So deaths in the family, triggering that mediumship ability at an early age. We also have that eighth house, Mercury ruling that fourth house, working from home, starting an entrepreneurship business, inheriting a family home via estate as well, especially with all of those deaths in the family that might have occurred at an early age. The idea that you have an estate that you've inherited is a very big connection between the fourth and the eighth. That's something just to be aware of. We have that moon in Aquarius up in the at 13 degrees up in the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality, ruling her second house Cancer placements. She doesn't have any planets in Cancer, but her second house of finance is ruled by Cancer. So it wouldn't surprise me if she derives a large portion of her income from ninth house topics like spirituality, which would fit the mediumship stuff, but also topics like travel, foreigners, higher education. Using those ninth house skills to acquire financial income is actually part of the big plan of her life, because she's got that north node in Aquarius up in the ninth house as well. So moving in that direction, Tiffany, I think is going to be really important for you long term. Understanding that you don't necessarily need to be limited by the people in your backyard in order to make income. Let's see where Saturn is. Saturn is over in the 12th in Taurus. That's another hospitalization placement. So we've got, again, a lot of liminal placements in your chart, Tiffany. Like there's a lot of people who are just skirting on the edge around you. People might have even referred to you as a Grim Reaper, or one of those figures that just constantly is not haunted in a bad way, but is death touched, is a good way to think about it. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. You just need to learn how to work with it a little bit better. A Saturn in Taurus in the 12th retrograde is a very stable placement. It's one of those placements that I really like to see in people who have or work in a field where they're around a lot of displaced entities, is a good way to say it. Because Saturn in Taurus retrograde is kind of like, it's the bull that digs its hooves in so deep that it actually becomes rooted into the ground. And that's the level of groundedness that I really, really enjoy seeing, especially because that Saturn is ruling your Mercury in Capricorn in the 8th. There's a lot of practicality. You know your routine. You know what to do on a daily basis in order to prevent yourself from falling into a spiral. And I think that that's really just smart of you to have that inbred nature of, stay grounded, stay focused, learn how to say no, have good boundaries. That's just something that you kind of came in with, Tiffany. And I think that that's a great offset to a lot of the more, I want to say flighty, but I don't mean flighty. I mean subtle, the subtler placements in your chart. We do have Jupiter and Scorpio in the 6th, as well as Venus and Scorpio in the 6th. And Jupiter and Scorpio in the 6th is ruling the Sun in Sag, as well as Neptune in Sag. Running into a spouse via the workplace, very, very common with those placements. There are also some things that we can't necessarily talk about in the podcast with those placements, or the podcast, the live stream with those placements, but we can talk about that during a consultation. That Mars and Libra ruling that 11th house is interesting. There's this, it's a fascinating placement for a couple reasons. When we look at you constantly having that nanny vibe, taking care of other people's children, that's one of the placements that we see a lot with common in that. But that Mars and Libra in the 5th is ruling that MC in Aries in the 11th. So making friends through creative endeavors, joining an art class that meets on a regular basis would be excellent for you. Exercising your creativity and building your social circle through those creative endeavors, definitely something that would be excellent. Also, you hosting kind of meetups for those groups to flourish in your home, in your space, because you have the space for it. And there's a lot of good potential to unlock your own creativity, but also build a tribe through those placements. Cool. Yes, let's go ahead, keep going. We have about 20 minutes left, and we have 3 more charts to go. Let's jump on. If you would like to book a private consult, check out some classes, or sign up for I don't know, sign up for the thing. You can always shoot me an email, Sam at ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, or just visit that website, Scorpio Rising Astrology, and we will get you on board. Talk to you a little bit more about astrology stuff. So let's talk about Laura. Born at 11:45 p.m. in Charleston. She's got a Scorpio ascendant. So we have Scorpio ascendant at 18 degrees, ruled by Mars and Capricorn in the third. We've already seen this placement. I think this was the first chart that we came across. So the idea that the self, that first house, the ascendant, is ruled by Mars in the third, that house of communication, writing, teaching, identifying very heavily as a writer, teacher, somebody who communicates on a regular basis. Neighborhood activities, also something, working with siblings, also something that that Mars in the third house tends to do, as opposed to the South Node being in the third house, which was the first chart. We have the North Node here. So this is actually something, this is a more favorable placement that I enjoy seeing. The idea that we've put the Lord of the chart in that third house of writing, teaching, communication. We've also put the North Node here, indicating that that's the life direction anyway. So Laura's really told us via this placement, she knows what she's doing. She knows what she wants. She knows what she's good at, and she's going to go get it. Simple as that. Really good stuff. Especially because that Mars is ruling the 6th house of work. I mean, she's just got a killer work ethic for sure. So bang out those books, Laura. Really awaken that writer teacher within, and you should be really, really easy. That's a simple read. Like, that's so easy to understand. You've really delineated it beautifully in the chart. So simple. Now, if you understand that meaning of your personal placements, and then incorporate the other things on top of it that we're about to talk about, then you'll find that process even easier. But really, it's back to the writing board. Okay, so we have the Moon in Aquarius and Jupiter in Aquarius down in the 4th, being ruled by Saturn in Libra in the 8th. Again, 4th house, 8th house connections, the idea of a family deaths at an early age, something that will be very present with those connections. The Moon in Aquarius and Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter in Aquarius, big family. Or Jupiter in the 4th house, rather. Moon in Aquarius is a little bit emotionally standoffish. It's a placement where the moon likes to bring connection. The moon likes to bring the feels to whatever sign it's in. But Aquarius is one of those signs that prefers to be loved at a distance. It doesn't really receive love very well. And so the moon in the 4th house is a little bit emotionally isolating. She likes to have a good emotional boundary between her and everybody that she's interacting with. It's something that she's just always had, like, keep your distance, not necessarily going to be super touchy-feely, and we just need to respect boundaries over everything. That's going to be a really big thing. Saturn in that 8th house of entrepreneurship, ruling the 4th. There is a working from home tendency that we can see in that chart. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? We want to talk about that 5th house. A lot of creativity in the chart, Laura. A lot of really good creativity, and I love seeing that paired with your writing, teaching, communication placements. We've got Mercury in Pisces. So recently, stuff has been absolutely rough for you with that Mercury in Pisces transit. Really screwed up kid stuff, really screwed up parent stuff, really screwed up. A lot of your creative juices have just been all over the wall with that Mercury transit. Thankfully, all that's done now, and you're out of the woods with that, and you're getting back on that steamroller path. But Mercury in Pisces, Sun in Pisces, Venus in Pisces. So we have a planet in its detriment. Mercury is in its detriment in Pisces, the sign that it least enjoys being in, whereas we have Venus in Pisces, the sign that it enjoys being in the most, here in the same house, and the Sun in between the two. So we have this identification with creativity, the creative process, being a mom, being a parent. All those things naturally kind of come to you. But we have these dry spells of creativity where nothing you do works out. And then we have these like Mona Lisa level creative expressions where you couldn't bottle that even if you tried. It's so abstract and so beautiful. But the only way that you do it is by showing up. And I think that's one of the things that your chart keeps telling me is if you don't step up to the plate, nothing will happen, Laura. And I know you've got a killer work ethic, but it's just that idea with your chart placements that we need to be super, super aware that if you don't put your hands in the clay, if you don't pick up the brush, if your fingers don't start moving over the keyboard, then you're not going to get access to that Venus and Pisces in your fifth house of creativity. You're not going to be able to tap into your true creative potential if you don't get going. And same thing with kids. Like, you're not going to become a better parent just by reading books. You can't be on the sidelines. Life is not a book learning opportunity. It's an interactive opportunity. And yeah, you can heighten your skills, but a lot of your chart speaks towards your creativity being activated through doing. And actually potentially being famous for that as well, because the sun in Pisces is ruling that 10th house of success. So that's really good. I enjoy that. One of the things that you might find really interesting about your chart is potentially doing art outreach in hospitals or jails or places where people are put away, like rehab clinics, things like that. But using art therapy as a medium in order to unlock people's processes. I think that especially later in life, that would be a really interesting way to use your gifts in order to kind of give back to a community should you feel the need to exercise your goodwill a little bit as you move forward through life. Cool. So that's good stuff. Let's go ahead and keep going. We've got a couple more charts to do and about 15 minutes to do them. So about 7 minutes each. We'll take on each chart. If you would like to submit yours, or if you have friends that would like to submit yours, feel free to share the live stream with them and have them reach out to me via private message. Give me birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time. And spell out the month and day, especially if you're overseas. We'll get you in the queue and we'll get your chart featured on these live streams. Okay, let's look at Terry. Terry was born 4:30 a.m. in Ipswich. Okay, Aries ascendant, making Mars, goodness, third chart this time with Mars in the sign of its exaltation in the 10th house of success. So when we have the ruler of the chart in that 10th house of success, there's a level of fame, there's a level of prestige that's naturally in the chart. So whatever Terry chooses to do throughout her life, she's going to be very well known for it. It's just something that she's associated her identity with, is that 10th house of striving, of success, of getting things done on a level that most people do not get done in their lifetime. We also have the North Node here. So she's supposed to learn how to be that successful person, learning how to be in the spotlight, learning how to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, but also expressive, but also sharing what she does with the world. You know, that's really what she's striving for. If she falls back into that South Node in the 4th house of family in Cancer, there's going to be a sliding backwards that's going to create chaos. We also have Uranus in Cancer down here in the 4th. So the home environment is actually a pretty unstable place for Terry. Always has been, always will be, which is what makes quarantine situations like this a little bit more difficult for people like Terry, especially with an Aries ascendant and Mars ruling the chart up in the 10th. Like, this is a go, go, go chart. This is a do, do, do chart. This is a bop chart. No, just kidding. So when we look at the placements of this chart, like, they're so active, they're so outwardly focused, there's so much about doing and contributing and being of value and enjoying what it means to be being at the top of your own personal mountain. But you can't do that from your couch, Terry. So when we look at one of the reasons I think why, especially early on, you might have questioned this, why you manifested a home environment that was so unstable, that did have so much unpredictability and uprootedness, it's because if you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't have gotten out of the house and you wouldn't have been forced to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my life? You would have caved in to that, literally caved in with that south node to that fourth house Cancer placement. And you would have really said, no, I don't want to get up today. But if you just keep moving, if you just put one foot in front of the other and get out of the house specifically, you'll find that there's a lot of value here. We do have the Sun in Taurus and Mercury in Taurus in that second house of finance. It's a great financial placement, especially because that second house of finance is connected to the fifth house of children, parenting, sexuality, as well as creativity. We've got connections between money house, family house, not family, parenting, children house. So the idea that the children or the parents and or both will be financially supporting Terry throughout her lifetime. That's always a nice placement, because money is never really worried about, although money is worried about, because who doesn't worry about money? But just the idea that there will always be a safety net from that perspective. Now that safety net won't come until later in life, because we have Pluto in Leo here in the fifth. So halfway through the life, we might find a death in the family, which gives us a good amount of inheritance, especially because that Mars is ruling that eighth house of Scorpio, Saturn retrograde. There's a lot of maturation that needs to occur in Terry's chart. There's a lot of ripening as she explores her placements that needs to unfold. But again, it really comes back down to that idea of, if Terry just keeps moving, if she just keeps getting out of the house, if she does not stay still, then that's when she'll avoid that south node trap in the fourth house of family and home, and she'll be able to catapult herself into that 10th house, where the lord of her chart is her Mars in Capricorn. We do have Jupiter and Venus, both benefics in Gemini in that third house of writing, teaching, communication. That's a fun placement, deriving a lot of income from writing, teaching, communication, as well as neighbors. There might be a little bit of real estate involved as well, just because we're seeing a lot of connections between kind of family, home stuff, and work and realtoring. So that might be a fun source of revenue. But just the idea of that writing, teaching, communication house having both benefics, both in air signs, really creating a lot of good vocality. She speaks very well. She has a very quick mind, and allowing those traits to really permeate and work towards that 10th house placement of embracing that success that that you're destined for is really a good chunk of Terry's chart. We do have Neptune in Libra retrograde in the 7th. So when we look at the 7th house, Libra, that Libra being ruled by Venus in the 3rd, wouldn't surprise me if spouse was a teacher, writer, communicator, worked with neighborhood association management, that kind of thing. But we do have Neptune in Libra here. Neptune in Libra, wherever Neptune touches, tends to make things muddy, tends to make things confused, tends to make things rather wishy-washy, hypersensitive. And from a relationship perspective, we don't like to see Neptune in the 7th house. On a higher octave, this would be Terry being attracted to a partner that is very spiritual, who's very balanced, who has a sense of how the universe works, and is able to really maintain a sense of calm or equilibrium, even under the most dire of circumstances. However, on a negative expression, Neptune in Libra in the 7th house could rule a partner, especially early on in relationships, that succumb to escapism. Somebody who was constantly trying to run from their own shadow, somebody who tried to access spirituality through ingesting chemical substances and thereby got addicted. But if we fast forward that to mature that Neptune, there's probably going to be a partner or partners who are just very enlightened, who are almost otherworldly in their enlightenedness, who don't necessarily feel to you as if they are of this earth. Yeah, that's that Neptune in Libra in the 7th, really, really coming forward, almost to their detriment. I mean, just the idea that they're so otherworldly that they can't do basic things like cook or clean or figure out what time it is or be on time for anything, really. That's part of that Neptune Libra placement. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. We've got about 5 or 6 more minutes. I'll probably go over, so Instagram will catch the rest on the Facebook Live or on the YouTube channel. We have one more chart, and that chart is Tony. Tony was born in Folkestone and born at 1:30 p.m. We have the exact same thing happening in the previous chart as this chart. So we have the ascendant at 27 degrees. It's at 27 degrees, a couple more minutes, and it would be a totally different chart. So we need to be very specific about Tony's birth time. But the ruler of the chart is the moon, and the moon is up in Aries in the 10th house of success, right? So when we see the ruler of the chart in the 10th house of success, there's this big, big, big identification of, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be successful. This is going to be my time to shine. I will do this. I am the best, especially with that moon in Aries. It's a very competitive edge. It's a very, it's just a very athletic, potentially, placement. But just the emotions being very fiery, and that fire helping them to climb to the top of their own personal mountain. It's just a really, it's a cool placement. That moon is being ruled. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So we have Venus and Mars, both in Aquarius in the 8th house, being ruled by Saturn and Capricorn in the 7th. Tony's super interesting because he's put Saturn in its proper sign in the 7th house, which naturally means that the spouse that Tony chooses is going to have Saturnian qualities. There will be stubbornness. There will be a certain amount of poise or composure, somebody who's going to mature later in life like a fine wine, somebody who's going to be able to say no in difficult situations, somebody who's going to really understand what it means to play the long game, all those Saturnian qualities. But because that 7th house ruler is ruling that 8th house of death, Tony might actually experience early on the death of a spouse, having multiple marriages because of being widowed. I'm not sure if you say widowed for a guy. Anyway. But yeah, just the idea that the spouse house, the relationship house, and the death house are connected. But also, when we look at the higher octaves of the house, the 8th house is also business. The 8th house is also estates, taxes. Wouldn't surprise me if Tony worked in the tax estate law realm, or worked with worked as a divorce attorney, working with estates, something in that realm, because we see Venus and Mars together in the same sign. The idea of gender being a very important issue in Tony's chart. Masculine, feminine nature not really necessarily taking on the same or different values. So we have Venus and Mars together in the same house, meaning that the feminine principle and the masculine principle are kind of on the same page. They're doing that same thing. It would surprise me if a lot of Tony's work in that tax accounting estates space actually worked with gender issues, people who are in transition, custody battles between mother and father, just the idea that two genders are coming together and allowing that to flourish in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, and business. We have Jupiter and Sagittarius in the 6th. That's a great placement. Jupiter and Sagittarius is also ruling that 9th house, that Sun Pisces, Mercury Pisces, South Node Pisces, which again, I've seen this placement a couple times in back to the estates in the legal profession, in people who work with immigration is a good way to think about it, because that 9th house rules travel and foreigners as well. That travel foreigner aspect being associated with that 6th house of work, health, pets, potential adoptions, that kind of thing, all within that legal field, back to that 8th house ruling the 10th. Cool. What else do we see? Money is a little bit unpredictable with Tony. When I say a little bit unpredictable, I mean a lot unpredictable. Wastes a lot of money on higher education, travel, and foreigners, because that Uranus in Leo is retrograde and ruled by the sun in Pisces up in the ninth. We need to be careful of those money sucks, Tony. Although you're naturally good at what you do, you don't need the piece of paper in order to prove it in most cases, like besides what you actually need in order to practice. But you don't need to go on that vacation as often as you think you do. You don't need to take that class as often as you think you do. You are very qualified in what you do, like you get it. But if you try to delude yourself or coax yourself into taking those unpredictable and financially expensive routes in your life, you're going to find that the money drains just a little bit quicker. Let's see what else. What else do we want to talk about? No, I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered a lot in Tony's chart. That's good stuff, and I think that really makes the crux of a lot of his stuff come to the surface. Because again, he's just like really good at what he does. Always has been, always will be. He just naturally has that shining star at the top of his chart, that Moon Lord in the Aries in the 10th. Really, really great side to the personality. Caring and like will kick butt at the same time. Great combo there. Very pleased with Tony's chart. Yes. Cool. So that is our live stream for today. Thank you everybody for submitting your charts. If you would like to submit your chart for the live stream, just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. Spell out the month and the day for me, especially for those of you overseas. We're getting charts from all over the world with this live stream. Share with your friends, share with your family. Yes, we can do spouses. Yes, we can do children. However, I would like you to obtain verbal consent from them to be featured, because this is a public forum, even though we're not giving out so much personal information. We do need to be aware of consent. I will post the link to the live stream once I post it on YouTube. We do have a YouTube channel that has all of the previous live streams on it, so I'll post that link in Facebook as well. Join me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram and Facebook for my daily posts if you're interested in the daily forecast. I also have consults available and classes available via ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. So that's my plug. Thank you for joining me, and may the stars be ever in your favor.